I said he and Wayne looked so well dressed, they were out of their job interviews. That didn't go over really well either.
I'm not laughing.
That I don't iron shirts, so it's
Now,
that.
smart.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Bishop from Channel 6 News, and I'm very honored to serve as your MC today for this National POW Day Fall of Bataan ceremony. A special thank you to Charlie Lowe for that rousing medley. I know we all enjoyed it very much. Thank you. And our first order of business is the posting of the colors. very pleased now to have Colonel John Edwards to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. The Gold Star Montgomery program apparently is not well. I don't know the reason she didn't come, so I'm taking her place. Will you kindly follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Charlie Lowe will lead us now in the singing of the national anthem. And we'd like to ask U.S. Navy Chaplain Captain Jerry Lattiser now to offer the invocation.
Let us pray. Our God in heaven, we gather today to commemorate those men and women who suffered the pain and loneliness of being held captive. Those held captive suffered a loss of youth and hope that most of us cannot imagine, yet it cannot be erased from the memories of those who endured it. We ask you, dear Lord, to bless all those who bore incredible cruelty and loss of dignity, so that we may live in true dignity that only freedom for all can guarantee. We ask you to bless all our missing comrades. Their families do not know if their loved ones are deceased and resting with you, or if they continue to exist among the living in a location known only by you. We pray for closure for the bereaved families and the return of our missing brothers and sisters. Dear God, we remember our fellow prisoners of war who died in this past year. Please embrace and keep them until one day we all enjoy that eternal rest together. Please bless and protect our service people serving at war today, so that we may have no more casualties of missing or dead. Help them in their duty to work for justice for all, in a world that desperately cries for peace. And we ask this in all that is holy. Amen.
And it's my pleasure, I think perhaps you can be seated. Yeah, it's a good time for that. It's my pleasure now to introduce our host for this event, the host city, Saratoga Springs. The mayor of Saratoga Springs is with us, Michael Lenz.
Thank you, Liz, very much. Thank you all for coming out today. Thank Lieutenant Governor Donahue for being here from the governor's office. I have some of my fellow colleagues in the political world. We have someone in Tedisco, Taco, McDonald, and Prentice are here. I see so many faces in the crowd that are familiar to me, and the thing that I think hits home for most of us that not only live in this city but across our country is that the people that we know, but also the people that we don't know, that have served our country so valiantly. And we pick up the newspaper every day, and unfortunately, as the chaplain indicated, so many of our veterans are passing away on almost a daily basis. And I think it's so appropriate that we gather on occasions such as this to remember. And I see all the branches of the service, and we sang those songs that are so heartfelt. And what it allows us to do, it allows us to remember what has happened in the past that was done to guarantee our freedoms now and in the future. And the horrors that these individuals experienced in war and in prison camps and in marches, those horrors are worth it if we can continue to guarantee the freedom. And they went through that so that my generation and the future generations will not have to endure it again. When I get up in the morning and I see my 5-year-old daughter and my 3-year-old son, I look at them and I realize that, and I hope in my heart, that they will never have to experience what those of you that are in this audience that lived through the horrors of war will have to experience. But we know, and we see it today in our armed services throughout the world, that if needed, we are there. If necessary to preserve freedom for our country and countries around the world, we are there. And we have that knowledge, we have that purpose, purposefulness, because of what our veterans have given us as an example to live by. And I am humbled as a 39-year-old man, a father of 2, as mayor of Saratoga Springs, to be in the presence of all of you individuals and to be here today to honor those that have passed, to honor those who have suffered, to honor those that have given the ultimate sacrifice for their country. It is truly, truly an honor for me to be here and participate. I thank you for all for coming, and on behalf of the city of Saratoga Springs, I want to offer our heartfelt thanks to all those that are here today and all those that have gone before us. Thank you very, very much. I also now have the honor of introducing our very fine Lieutenant Governor, Mary Donahue, who is here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this very solemn and memorable occasion to remember and to renew our commitment. That's why we're here this morning. The commitment that we leave no man or woman behind. That we honor and account for all of our brave soldiers, many of whom had the fruit of youth taken away from them in prisoner of war camps. The greatest generation brought freedom to people on a global scale. However, too many of them knew what it was like to have freedom indelibly and totally denied to them. Freedom is something that some of us all too often take for granted. As prisoners of war, they came to know painfully how fundamentally important liberty and freedom are. It is a lesson we should all remember. In the year 2000, Governor Pataki set forth to preserve our veterans' legacy in World War II by announcing an oral history initiative. This initiative recorded the personal histories of New York veterans across our state who served in the U.S. military during World War II. With the assistance of veterans organizations and groups such as the New York State Military Institute, we are now providing, in the words of Dr. Stephen Ambrose, and I quote, contact with World War II veterans for today's children and for children yet to be born. There is no better way for those kids to learn the values of teamwork, patriotism, courage, and sacrifice. End of quote. When I arrived this morning, I spoke with Dr. John Browe. In preparing and reading background for today's event, I had seen his name, and I saw kind of a faded Xerox picture of him. And I said to my staff, I wonder if this is a Dr. Browe, whose daughter was my childhood friend on the east side of Troy. When I arrived, I was stunned when I looked into his eyes. It was Dr. Browe. I grew up in Troy with his family. We lived a block apart. In the 50s and 60s, I never knew until today that the Dr. Browe I knew as a loving, professional, dignified, intelligent family man was the John Browe who had suffered so terribly. It's a tribute to him and to his humility that he never wore his honor on his sleeve. It took us to pay him honor. His daughter, whom I know is a positive reflection on him, that's the way I know Dr. Browe. His daughter, Patsy, is a wonderful community leader. I worked with her at the YWCA in Troy in recent years on initiatives. She's a lot like her dad. Low-key, humble, community-oriented, and not looking for any type of fanfare. But fanfare, if ever there were a reason for fanfare, isn't it the reason that we're here today? Dr. Browe has contributed greatly to our state's oral history program. As a former prisoner of war under the Japanese, and a survivor at the Bataan, as I heard him pronounce it this morning, death march, Dr. Browe knows that without people like him, those important and yes, devastating sacrifices would never have reached the light of day. And hearing about those sacrifices is not only an important lesson for us to honor and respect what they have done, but also to put our own sacrifices, our own trials and tribulations into perspective. When we remember what happened at Bataan, we know that we truly are fortunate with the good life that we lead in the United States of America. In Bataan, prisoners of war fought to live, to return, and to tell their horrible tale to the world. As honorable soldiers of the highest degree, they were treated dishonorably as prisoners of war. They paid the most tragic price of all on the road from Bataan, dying where they fell and were ignored by the roadside. We must continue to fight for their own freedom, to unshackle the earthly bonds, some of them still left half a world away, and to do our utmost to bring them home where they can rest here on our soil alongside their comrades and their loved ones. Dr. Browe and his fellow prisoners of war who are gathered here today, and all those who suffered as they did as prisoners of war who could not be with us, are owed by us a huge and immeasurable debt that we can never truly repay. Their hardships, their pain, and their suffering on our behalf went far beyond the call of duty which they answered. Today, a world away, a new generation of courageous men and women are fighting once again to ensure our freedom, our liberty. It is our duty, as it was with the generations that experienced war before us, to never forget their sacrifices. Thank you for joining us this morning and paying honor and tribute on this very solemn and sad anniversary.
Thank you, Governor. Here now to read a presidential proclamation is Colonel John Edwards, retired, a former prisoner of war.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate the opportunity. You know, like in any program, there's always some last-minute details. And in this case, last minute was just a few hours ago when I had it faxed, the presidential proclamation. We've been waiting. I was nervous. Stanley, presidential proclamation. We put it in the program. Yes, we'll have the proclamation. I'll just summarize quickly the proclamation in view of the time that we have. It's from the White House, President George W. Bush. National Prisoner of War Recognition Day 2004. American former prisoners of war are our national heroes whose service to our country will never be forgotten. These brave men and women who fought for America endured hardships beyond imagination. Prisoners of war helped to protect our nation, liberated our nations and other nations from the events of the past and advanced the cause of freedom worldwide. This is very fine print. Now, therefore, I, George W. Bush, President of the United States of America, by my authority vested in me by the Constitution and laws of the United States, do proclaim 2004 a National POW Recognition Day on this April 9th, 2004. I call upon the people to join me in remembering former prisoners of war by honoring their memory and sacrifices. In witness thereof, I therefore set my hand on this date, April 9th, in the year 2004, the independence of the United States of America, the 128th anniversary. This fax was in the best fax. That's signed, George W. Bush, President of the United States. Thank you for bearing with me.
I'll back him up on it. I've seen it now. We would like to welcome now the Director of the New York State Division of Veterans Affairs, George Basher, is here now to share with us the Governor's Proclamation.
Liz, thank you. Good morning. You know, those of us who are in the veterans business see a lot of each other every day. But this group that we're honoring today is really special to us, as well as the rest of the country. And the story the Lieutenant Governor told is such a moving one, but you know, I think if everybody reaches a little, you'll find one of these guys in your life. Growing up in Western New York, I had Art Matthey next door to me, and he's now 85 years old. He's a Bataan death march survivor as well. And part of why I'm here today has to do with him. And these fellows came home, and they continued to serve. You know, John Edwards, what you see here is a lot of John Edwards, and he should be congratulated for that and the group that he works with. So this is an event that all of us really commemorate, and the state wants to pay special recognition and special homage to this group, hence the Governor's Proclamation, which I'll now read. Whereas the greatness of America is found in the vigilance of some of its sons and daughters to place themselves in harm's way to defend our nation and to preserve the precious liberties and freedoms enjoyed and cherished by the United States and other countries of the world. And whereas time and again throughout our history, men and women have readily stepped forth to join our nation's armed forces, giving selflessly of themselves and making many personal sacrifices while battling America's enemies in global and regional wars and conflicts. And whereas today our servicemen and servicewomen again have been called upon to stand firm against terrorists and tyrants who threaten our way of life and indiscriminately kill innocent people in their evil mission to destroy our nation. And we must remember that these brave Americans in uniform are at great risk, constantly facing death, injury, or capture at the hands of brutal enemies. And whereas in previous conflicts and during the current war being fought in Iraq, more than 142,000 American soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen have been held as prisoners by foreign enemies. And we remember these noble and courageous military personnel who, in the act of defending our nation, relinquished their own freedom while fighting to preserve our blessings of peace and liberty. And whereas the immense suffering of our prisoners of war was also shared by their families who grieved endlessly over their fate for weeks, months, and even years, not knowing when or if they would ever see their loved ones alive again. And whereas the valor of our prisoners of war reflected the American values of honor and decency for all to witness, their heroism and inspiration to those fighting to preserve democracy and for the release of their comrades. And whereas we must never forget that our prisoners of war know better than anyone the high price of maintaining freedom, and that we must always remain vigilant to those who would challenge our independence and cherished way of life in America. And today we honor our veterans and former prisoners of war, extending special thoughts and prayers to our current armed forces who show tremendous courage in defending this nation and all freedom-loving countries of the world. Now, therefore, I, Georgie Pataki, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby proclaim April 9th, 2004 as America Ex-Prisoners of War Day in the State of New York, with gratitude and admiration for the courage, loyalty, and love our former prisoners of war offered to our great nation and to its people. Thank you.
It's certainly with great satisfaction that we see the tremendous support here today among the lawmakers and civic leaders who have joined us, and I'd like to just take a moment to recognize them. The list is a little bit long, so I suggest that you hold your applause and we'll have a rousing thank you at the end. How's that? So, but please know that we appreciate the presence of Assemblyman Roy McDonald, Assemblyman Bob Prentice, Assemblyman Jim Tedisco, Assemblyman Paul Tonko, Colonel F. David Shepard, the Deputy Adjutant General of the New York State Division of Military and Naval Affairs. From the Governor's Office, Bill Howard, the Deputy Director of the Governor's Office, First Deputy Director, I'm sorry, and Jim Natoli, the Director of Disaster Preparedness, and the President of the New York State Military Heritage Institute, Fred Altman, is with us, as well as the Director of the State Military Museum and Veterans Research Center, Michael Akey. Okay, that's the list. You can now applaud. And you will need no prompting as I introduce our very next guest. With us today, a man who survived the fierce fighting in the Philippines, our honored guest, Dr. John Browe. Dr. Browe survived the infamous Bataan Death March, where hundreds of American soldiers died. Your audience here. Yes, would you like to come and say something? Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very, very much. It was very, well, it makes it all worthwhile, I guess. Thank you. Because when we came home, nobody believed us. That's happened before. honored guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I wish to talk about someone else before we listen to what happened to me. It's a man by the name of Dick Gordon, who founded the Battling Bastards of Bataan, which come from those words and tone from a newspaper correspondent who was with us over there, no mama, no papa, no Uncle Sam. If you know the story, that was quite true. One of Dick Gordon's, if not his greatest wish in life, was to have gone to West Point. And he certainly acted that way. And I would like to tell you a little bit about him because many things happened to him after he came home. Born in Manhattan on November 10th, 1921, he was a survivor of the Bataan Death March. And I'm fulfilling my obligation to him right now by saying I was not on the Death March. I didn't leave Bataan until 2nd of July. Couldn't have made it any more than the men from Corregidor could have made the Death March, because they didn't surrender till long after the Death March was over. And this is the function of the Battling Bastards, to get the truth out. There's very little of it. He was a captive for 3.5 years. He remained in the Army until 1960, serving in Germany, Okinawa, and several stateside assignments. In 1972, he graduated from the University of Maryland and subsequently earned his master's degree in criminal justice from C.W. Post in Long Island. He served as Deputy Director of the Drug Control Authority for Suffolk County and retired as Director of the Vermont Academy for Criminal Justice. And it was just about that time that I finally met him. He left Camp O'Donnell on July 5th, 1942, and I arrived there on July 2nd, 1942. I probably saw him, but didn't recognize him. And when we finally did meet, John Edwards asked me to ride with him to Rutland, Vermont, where he was invited to install the Vermont chapter of the former prisoners of war. And that's where I met Dick Gordon. He was there too. And we've known each other pretty intimately ever since. Unfortunately, he did die last summer, early July 26th. And I began my stateside duties, let's say, at his wake. When the surrender at Bataan was described by a speaker who would remain nameless, I corrected him on that. I could almost hear Dick say thanks, and his wife thanked me afterwards. Who incidentally is in the middle of our audience right here. Glenn, will you please stand up? Since his retirement, he has worked tirelessly as the founder and adjutant of the Battling Bastards of Bataan, an organization of Bataan survivors dedicated to the pursuit of truth and the correction of revisionist history. He was a published author and a renowned speaker, and many of these writers wrote to him to have him share his experience and read and check over their facts. Some of them paid attention, and some didn't. Some still had the survivors of Corregidor in the Bataan Death March. Of course, Corregidor fell quite some time after the Bataan Death March. He was predeceased by his wife of 47 years, and since that time, I have been fortunate in knowing and keeping up with what he had done, and these notes I've just added to this obituary. Mrs. Brady, the wife of the last commander of the 31st Infantry gave Dick the 31st Infantry records. And he has responded to all who sought information from the website he established. And towards the end, he found it difficult to do that because he had to read even typewritten pages with a magnifying glass. And I would be willing to say that his efforts resulted in his final illness. And the website, of course, still exists. The organization still exists. I have been pretty much on the sick list since last September. And actually, this is my first public speaking since then. And I'm sure that Lynn can provide you with the call letters and the website and so forth. And I'm certain that there will be arrangements made to continue the work that Dick has done. And he has been interred in Section 1 of the National Cemetery at Arlington. And I think we are honored by, I am certainly, by his widow being here today. Well, John Browe was born on November 17, 1915 in Burlington, Vermont. He attended the University of Vermont School of Medicine from 36 to 40 and was married on September 23, 1939. He graduated in June 1940 with an MD degree and commissioned First Lieutenant Medical Corps of U.S. Army Reserve. He entered a 2-year rotating internship in medicine at the Municipal Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut on July 1, 40. And on July 1, 1941, he was ordered to active duty at the Harbor Defenses of Portland. I always have to remember Maine, because everybody assumes it was on the West Coast. On September 23, 1941, he received secret orders to report to the Philippine Department. He embarked on the General Tasker H. Bliss, the President Cleveland, formerly, on October 4, 1941. After reading in the San Francisco paper, despite the secrecy of the orders, that I was ordered to the Philippines. He arrived in Manila on October 23rd, assigned to the Philippine Division at Fort William McKinley, south of Manila. The Philippine Division was made up of American officers and Filipino enlisted men, the Philippine Scouts, with the exception of the 31st Infantry, whose enlisted men were Americans. In fact, well, many of those Filipino Scouts are Americans too these days. The Philippine Division was a unit of the regular Army. On Monday morning, December 8th, the news about Pearl Harbor was received, as well as airstrikes on Luzon. Late evening on Tuesday, Company B, 12th Medical Battalion, set out for Bataan, arriving at the town of Hermosa at mid-morning, December 10th. I was to remain on Bataan until July 3rd, 1942. Company B collected the wounded from 8 stations of the 31st Infantry and transported them to clearing stations in the rear. 31st first saw action on the Abucay Hacienda line in late January and early in April. By the way, I've just received a DVD that the Filipinos government made for the benefit of the Filipinos to let them know what really happened there and be proud of what their men did. And I've learned now that every now and then I'll repronounce the word because we never call them by the right names. Cabanatuan, Cabatuan, etc. The 31st saw action for the first time on the Abucay Hacienda line late in January and began early in April. They were on half rations since early January, quarter rations since mid-March, and on April 8th there was sufficient food for 1 day only. How you figure that one out, I don't know. But for 1 day only for some 80,000 persons on the time. And nobody figured on there being 40,000 civilians down there too. On April 9th, 1942, the largest American army in history to surrender, had that happen to them. I'll have more about that particular ceremony that happened there. The commanding officer of the concentration camp at O'Donnell, after the death march, the destination of the death march, he greeted each group with, "You think you are the lucky ones. Your comrades died on Bataan. They were the lucky ones." I think he was right. He also assured the American captives that the slightest violation of any order would result in their immediate execution. And this did happen occasionally. If they found a prisoner had something Japanese on him, they just took him out behind the building and shot him. Very simple. For the first few groups entering the American area at O'Donnell, because it was both American and Filipino present, General King himself briefly addressed the newcomers. He apologized for the circumstances in which they found themselves and shouldered the blame for the fact that the surrender had been necessary. "You did not surrender." His voice began to quiver. "I did. I surrendered, General." And General King did not know until after the war was over that he had not disobeyed orders, because we were told to fight to the death. But the big brass got some sense just before the surrender happened by General King, who surrendered just to the Bataan forces. And he said, "I am surrendering." I don't think that fact is very well known. Wainwright and MacArthur, and as far as I can remember, what I heard, radio or whatnot, that Roosevelt too suggested that it'd be nice if we did surrender. But King had a little more sense in the event. If we hadn't surrendered, there wouldn't have been any survivors. I wouldn't have been here for sure. For the first few groups entering the American area at O'Donnell, for the 9,300 Americans and 50,000 Filipinos who entered O'Donnell between April 14 and April 24, their war had barely begun. For some, the dreary routine of existence in O'Donnell would be only days. For others, 5 to 7 weeks. For still others, 8 to 10 weeks. And for a handful, almost 9 months. For about 65 Americans and 28,000 Filipinos, it would be for the rest of their lives. It was only in August this was written in 1988, and it was only in August 1942 that the remaining American captives in the Philippines were recorded prisoner of war status. Those who survived the next 3 years were released in September 1945. Of the 11,800 Americans who were surrendered on Bataan, only 1,200 were still alive in 1988. Within 38 hours after arriving at O'Donnell, and we were fortunate to be able to be driven up by a truck. I had severe dysentery, and in August, a near fatal bout with infectious hepatitis. My convalescent weight was 95 pounds. Late in October, he was transferred with about 40 other medical personnel to Cabanatuan Camp Number 1, where the previous residents of O'Donnell had been sent. The deaths at Cabanatuan varied from 30 to 45 a day. The newcomers were alerted to be ready to go to Browe, Mindanao the next day. Things were so bad that there were sufficient volunteers to eliminate the need for the recent arrivals to be included. I was returned to Bilibid prison in mid-October, where I remained until December, except for a few days in November when I was assigned to a 100-man detail as extras on Corregidor for the Japanese propaganda movie Down with the Stars and Stripes. It was only at a Northeast chapter meeting in 1985 that Browe and another member of that chapter, Al Tiber, who was a medical corps man, realized that they had both been on the rock, Corregidor, in November 1943. There was a detail of 200 men, 160 medical corps men and 40 doctors and dentists went to Japan. They followed 3 weeks in the hold of the freighter, disembarking at Moji. We went to Camp 4B at Noetz, which was populated by many Australians and English, and who had been in other parts of Europe as part of the war. And they had left Singapore and arrived in Noetz, which is on the straight line between Vladivostok and Tokyo. And with the only clothes they had were the tropical clothes, if you could call them that they left Singapore with in December. The Aussies, of course, thought that Japan was winning the war. I was the first person from the outside that they had ever seen or heard from, and they wanted to know where I was from, and I told them Vermont, and that's where the word Vermonster began. That was my name for the rest of the war. And to heck with Ben and Jerry. I was quite ill in November or December of 1944, and for some reason or other, there had been an order come out after several prisoners had been killed by a collapsing roof of a barracks. There was too much snow on it, and I was privileged in that to spend a few weeks, many more weeks than they intended, at the Shinagawa Hospital in Tokyo Bay. Tokyo Bay is surrounded by man-made islands, the dirt being carried there on the backs of Korean coolies before the turn of the century. And the hospital for the prisoners was one of those shacks built for prisoner laborers, and that was it. So we were rather happy to, I was rather happy to get out of that spot, particularly when the fire raids began, but also was privileged, if you want to call it that, for the raid on March 10th of 45, in which 334 B-29s took off for Tokyo loaded with more than 2,000 tons of incendiaries. The strategic bombing survey estimated that probably more persons lost their lives. For those people who were worried about Hiroshima, more people lost their lives by fire in a 6-hour period than any equivalent period of time in the history of man. More than 100,000 men, women, and children died in 6 hours. A million were injured, at least 41,000 seriously, and 1 million in all lost their homes. And it was determined, this is from another source, I'm not certain of it, but that 81% of the buildings in that area were homes, not factories. Noetz remained about the same until early June, when there were unfounded, persistent rumors that peace was imminent. The prisoners were told that they would all be shipped to Korea if the war continued. The reality was the threat that as no prisoners would survive in any event, and there are orders that all prisoners were to be killed is well documented. Near the end of June, more than 400 prisoners were transferred from Osaka. Indonesians, merchant seamen, and others making up a motley crew. On the morning of August 15th, the Australian cooks who had access to the Japanese building told us that all of the Japanese were in their best uniforms and listened to the radio at 11 o'clock that morning. The information was confirmed late that afternoon, but it was a few days before the Japanese camp commander informed us that the war had entered a ceasing condition. General Summerall, Quartermaster General, shook the hands of the returning PWs in San Francisco. Then ashore did not sing to us as promised when we sailed under the Golden Gate Bridge, but no one minded. That's how it ended.
Thank you so much, Dr. Browe. Please be seated. We're going to bring Colonel Edwards up now to recognize our other prisoners of war.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. We remember you many years ago when our chapter was formed, and you were reported in and reported on the chapter, and we always will remember you. Give her a hand. Is she? Mayor, fellow POWs, veterans, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you all coming for this program. I wasn't a POW as long as Dr. Browe, so therefore my part will be very short. The committee was asking me, what can we do about this coming event? What will the weather be? Will it rain? We get sun and so forth? Well, let me just say this. For POWs, every day is a sunny day. Except for sacrificing one's life, no one has endured greater hardships than a POW. Last century, all former POWs served outside the continental United States in sea, air, and land. They were wounded in combat at the time of captivity, and many were wounded after they were captured, suffered severe wounds. These individuals, the POWs, were exposed to the most inhumane treatment ever perpetrated on human lives, human beings. When many units had returned to the States and the individuals, the POWs lingered in camps or in solitary confinement, whatever. They were always under stress. Now, it wasn't just the men that were POWs, there were women POWs. Going back to World War II, at the Philippines in Corregidor, 100 Army Navy nurses were captured by the Japanese and kept in captivity until the war ended. Last year, we recall, Shoshana Johnson and Jessica Lynch were POWs, and that was well covered. But there was another woman POW in the Persian Gulf War. Her name, Rhonda Conlon. And she was a doctor, and she was with the 101st Airborne. She had indicated that if ever she was captured, that she was prepared to suffer sexual abuse. And in the book she wrote, and the name of the book, She Went to War, she chronicled her experiences. And let me just quote what she said for a moment, just a moment. I had promised myself I wouldn't scream unless I was in a life-threatening danger or something was so painful I couldn't stand it, she wrote. She went on. But when he, the Iraqi captor, tried to yank my flight jacket over the shoulders, it was like a jolt of electricity that shocked me to no end. My scream meant for him to stop, but he continued. Hunnam is presently the commanding officer of the Landstuhl Medical Center in Landstuhl, Germany, and she overcame a lot of that, but you can't overcome completely your experiences, as you all know. You know, there's sometimes a talk, oh, American ex-prisoner of war, you surrendered. You didn't want to fight anymore. You're yellow bellies. And there are articles, I have them on file, written by different writers. I just want to let you know that American prisoners of war never surrendered. They were forcibly taken. What do you think of an air crew that was shot and they had to bail out? Could they take the 50 caliber machine gun with them? Of course not. How about a ship that was sunk, the sailors that survived and were in rafts? Could they take their deck guns with them to fight? No. How about on the ground, land fighting? The unit was surrounded. You fought till all the ammunition was gone. You were captured. What could you do? Then you were suffered behind the lines, long walks and so forth. I would like to just leave with you what I would call the 4 F's. What is in the mind of the POW? What is he going through? And not necessarily in the order, but one F, first F that comes to mind, faith. Each and every one of you people, the POWs especially, you know that when you come to a situation, you think of God. You're scared, no question about it. Most of the POWs were either teenagers or early 20s, away from home the first time. Scared, that's just a slight word that I think is even worse than what some of them went through. You were frightened. You only could, and alone, you didn't know what was going to happen the next moment. Will I be alive? You pray to God. Another is their family. You've lost contact with your family. You can't communicate. You think about your family. And even throughout the encampment, always a thought, how are they doing, what are they doing, etc. and so forth. What's the, another one? An F? Food. We never got enough food. You waited for Red Cross parcels, but you don't know when they were coming. There was never enough food. And whatever you got just to sustain you. And on forced marches, you never got, you really had to push yourself to go on these forced marches. And that's why POWs, when they returned, were all, well, many pounds underweight. And finally, I think you probably would know what it was like. What did we miss the most? Freedom. Freedom. Unless your freedom was taken away, you never can appreciate that freedom. I recall when General Patton's 14th Armored Division came through and liberated our camp. They knocked down the gates and so forth, and that was a great day, the Liberation Day. And moments later, this flag went up. There was such a roar. Well,
Hey, John.
it's there. It'll never be down. That was our roar that I'm sure echoed all the way back to America. Freedom. This great flag, and it was worth fighting for. Believe me, let's always remember, if it comes to pass that we must defend this country, this flag, let's join together and even support our troops that are in harm's way today. Believe me, this is the greatest country in the world. Believe me, as having denied their freedom, and you know that you were denied freedom, this is a great country to live in. Now let me take a moment to introduce the POWs. Charlie Green, 6.5 years, POW in Vietnam, called me late last night and was just so distraught. He said, I can't make it today. My mother is terminally ill and she's in New Hampshire. I hoped that I could have delayed it, but he said, no, I had to leave. Most of his time was spent in solitary confinement. Charlie Green lives here in Schenectady. Then we have from the Vietnam War, the Korean War, we have Glenn Hammond. Glenn Hammond, stand up. You and